This podcast is sponsored by Stonefly, your trusted solution provider and advisor in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, hyper-converged and cluster servers, and public and private cloud. Check out stonefly.com or email your project requirements to sales@stonefly.com for more information. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a topic I know is on many minds: how to successfully navigate the world of real estate negotiation.
Ah, yes, a big one.
You flag this as something you're keen to understand better, whether you're thinking about buying, selling, or maybe even investing.
hmm
So our goal today is to really unpack the core strategies, those little nuances that can make a big difference in getting the deal you actually want.
It's definitely more than just, haggling over price, isn't it? It's this fascinating blend of understanding the market, a bit of psychology, and honestly, just really smart preparation.
Right.
What stands out immediately, I think, is that successful negotiation isn't about being aggressive. It's much more about being strategic and, understanding the playing field before you even make that offer.
Absolutely. And one of the first things that struck me was this point about emotional control. Easier said than done, right?
Oh, totally.
But the idea that not showing your hand, not letting on how much you love a place, can actually be a powerful tool. They even mentioned the effectiveness of silence. How does just, not saying anything give you an advantage?
It's interesting, the psychology there. Imagine you've made an offer.
Yeah.
If you just stay silent, the other party can get pretty uncomfortable with that void.
Uh-huh.
They might feel, compelled to fill it, perhaps by revealing more about why they're selling, or
Yeah.
maybe even making a concession they hadn't planned on. Sort of a subtle way to shift the focus and see how they react under a bit of unspoken pressure.
Now that you mention it, yeah, it feels like the ball's in their court and they feel the need to say something. It can get a bit awkward for them.
Exactly.
And that ties into this other idea that knowledge is power. It's not just about knowing what you want, but really digging deep into the market, understanding things like, say, zoning, and even studying what successful investors do. How does all that background work actually give you leverage?
Well, if you think about it, being truly knowledgeable lets you build a stronger, more credible position.
Mm.
Like if you, as a buyer, have done a thorough CMA, that's a comparative market analysis,
Right. The CMA.
and you can clearly explain why your offer is fair based on recent sales nearby, well, the seller is much more likely to take you seriously than if you just, throw out some random low number.
Makes sense.
And knowing about potential zoning changes, for instance, could give you insight into future value that maybe the seller hasn't even considered. That kind of informed perspective builds trust. And trust, as we know, can be a huge advantage.
That makes total sense. It's about showing you're serious, you've done your homework, and it's not just about the property itself, is it? Understanding what makes the other party tick seems just as important.
Oh, absolutely crucial.
If you can figure out why someone's selling or what a buyer really needs, you can sort of tailor your approach, right? To create maybe a win-win or at least an outcome that's better for you.
Exactly. When you understand their motivations, you can craft a deal that speaks directly to those needs. Let's say a seller needs to close really quickly because they're relocating.
Okay.
You, as the buyer, offering a faster closing timeline, maybe even without a huge price cut, that could be incredibly appealing. It might give you an edge over other offers. It's about finding what's truly valuable to them, and it's not always just the price tag.
Okay, let's dive into some specifics then, maybe starting with buyers. The CMA, the comparative market analysis, keeps coming up. For someone who's never done one, what exactly does that involve? What are they looking at?
Think of it like your homework, your fact-finding mission. You're looking at recent sales data, ideally, the last 3 to 6 months, fairly close by, maybe half-a-mile radius, for properties that are as similar as possible to the one you like. You're looking at sale prices of homes with similar square footage, number of beds and baths, lot size. Condition is important too.
Right.
Try not to get too distracted by outliers. Those really high or low sales might have weird circumstances. The goal is just to establish a realistic range of what similar places have actually sold for, not just what they were listed at. Gives you a data-backed starting point.
Okay, so it's about grounding your offer in reality, not just, oh, I love this kitchen.
Pretty much, yeah. Less emotion, more facts at this stage.
What about the physical condition of the property? That seems like another area where buyers might be able to negotiate.
Oh, definitely. If the property inspection turns up necessary repairs, especially the big stuff, things affecting safety or major systems like the roof, the furnace, plumbing, those become totally legitimate points for negotiation.
So what do? Ask for money off.
You could ask for a price reduction to cover the estimated cost of repairs, Or you could ask the seller to actually fix those things before closing. Now, for sellers listening, maybe think about tackling minor repairs proactively or pricing your property knowing there are bigger issues. It can make the whole process smoother.
Okay. And earlier, we touched on seller motivation. How can a buyer even begin to figure out why someone is selling? That seems tricky.
It's a bit like detective work sometimes. You pay attention during showings. Are there moving boxes already packed? Do they let slip something about a job transfer?
Hmm.
Your real estate agent can also try to, gently probe the seller's agent for info. How long has the property been listed? Any recent price drops? Those can all hint at the seller's urgency and maybe their willingness to negotiate.
Gotcha.
Of course, sellers need to be careful what they reveal too. Too much desperation can weaken their position.
And what about the earnest money deposit? I kind of thought that was just a formality, but apparently putting down more can actually strengthen your offer. How does that work?
Think of the earnest money as like putting your money where your mouth is. It signals seriousness.
Right. Skin in the game.
Exactly. Putting down a larger deposit tells the seller you're a committed buyer, you're less likely to just walk away for no good reason. This can be particularly persuasive if maybe your offer is a little under asking price. It gives the seller more assurance you'll actually close the deal.
Okay, interesting. So, offer accepted, then comes the inspection. That feels like another really crucial point for potential negotiation. What's the best way for a buyer to handle that?
Yeah, the inspection contingency is key. The main thing is to focus on significant issues, things related to safety, structure, major systems, leaky roof, bad wiring, foundation problems.
Not like the ugly wallpaper.
Exactly, probably not the wallpaper.
Hmm.
Minor cosmetic stuff usually isn't worth risking the deal over. You present the findings clearly, professionally, maybe with quotes from contractors, if you can get them quickly. Then you can ask for specific repairs, or maybe a credit at closing so you can handle repairs yourself, or just a straight price reduction.
And what about sellers? How can they prepare?
Well, some sellers get a pre-inspection done before listing. That way, they know what might come up and can either fix it or disclose it up front. It can help manage buyer expectations and avoid nasty surprises later.
Instead of just a lower price, sometimes buyers might ask for seller concessions. What are some typical examples of those, and why might a seller actually prefer that?
Yeah, that's a good strategy sometimes. Common concessions are things like the seller paying for some or all of the buyer's closing costs,
Oh, okay.
or giving a credit for specific repairs identified in the inspection, or maybe even agreeing to leave behind certain appliances, like the washer and dryer.
And why would a seller go for that instead of just lowering the price?
Well, sellers might find it more palatable because it keeps the official sale price of the home higher. That can be kind of a psychological win, and it looks better for neighborhood comps later on. Plus, sometimes contributing to closing costs feels like less of a direct hit than just knocking thousands off the sale price.
Flexibility on the closing date also came up. How can a buyer use that as a bargaining chip?
If you, as a buyer, aren't locked into a super strict moving timeline, and you can accommodate the seller's preferred closing date, maybe they need extra time to find their next place, or they need to close really fast.
Right.
That flexibility can be really valuable to them. It offers convenience without changing the price, and they might be more willing to budge on other terms in return. Sellers should definitely mention their ideal timeline up front.
Let's talk about cash offers. They always seem to get sellers excited. Why is that, even if the cash offer is maybe a bit lower than one with financing?
Cash is king, as they say, mainly because it removes the biggest uncertainty for sellers, the buyer's mortgage falling through.
The financing risk.
Exactly. There's no lender appraisal to worry about, no underwriting process dragging on. It usually means a faster, smoother, and much more certain closing. That reduced risk and speed is super appealing. So, yeah, sellers might take a slightly lower cash offer over a higher finance one just for the peace of mind.
Makes sense. They need to weigh that certainty versus the potentially higher price.
Precisely.
And for any buyer relying on a mortgage, getting pre-approved seems like, well, table stakes, really. Almost a sign of good faith.
Oh, absolutely essential. Getting pre-approved shows the seller you're serious, you're financially capable, and you're likely to actually get the loan. Sellers are way more likely to take your offer seriously if it comes with a solid pre-approval letter.
And sellers should definitely ask for that letter.
Always. It helps them gauge how solid the buyer's finances are.
Now, what happens when your initial offer isn't accepted? Counteroffers. That back and forth. Any key strategies there?
Counteroffers are totally normal. It's part of the negotiation dance. As a buyer, you need to look carefully at each counter. Don't feel rushed. Does it still meet your goals, your budget? Be ready to negotiate further, maybe counter their counter, or decide if it's time to walk away if the terms just aren't right anymore.
And for the seller,
Sellers should use counters strategically to keep serious buyers in the game. Maybe they come down a bit on price or offer a concession we talked about, trying to find that middle ground. Even if the first offer was kind of low, a smart counteroffer can keep the conversation going.
it sounds like making a strong but fair initial offer is pretty critical to even get the negotiation started properly. What makes an offer fair? How do you avoid lowballing?
Yeah, lowballing can really backfire. A fair offer is one that's grounded in your research, that CMA again,
Right.
and reflects the current market realities. You need to show the seller your offer isn't just plucked out of thin air. Back it up with comparable sales data. Show them you've done the work, and your offer is based on what similar homes are actually selling for, not just a wish for a bargain.
And finally, this idea of being prepared to walk away. That sounds really hard, especially if you found a place you love, but why is it considered such a powerful tactic?
It is hard, no doubt, but being genuinely willing to walk away signals that you have clear boundaries, your
Yeah.
budget, your non-negotiables.
Right.
It shows you won't be pressured into a deal that doesn't work for you. That can actually be a very powerful position. The seller knows you're not desperate, that you won't just agree to anything. It gives you a sense of control, and frankly, sometimes it's the only thing that gets the other side to seriously reconsider their stance.
Okay, this has been incredibly helpful for understanding the buyer's side, the negotiation tactics. Now, shifting gears a bit, what about finding those potential deals in the first place? Those hidden gems, maybe undervalued properties, or sellers who might be more motivated?
Finding the deals. Yeah, that often means looking where other people aren't.
Yeah.
One classic method is driving for dollars.
Driving for dollars sounds literal.
It is. You literally drive or walk through neighborhoods you're interested in, looking for properties that look distressed. Maybe they're vacant, clearly need repairs, have super overgrown yards, that kind of thing. Then you do the work to find out who owns it, public records usually, and reach out to them directly with an offer. Since these aren't listed openly, you often face way less competition. It's a self-generated lead list, basically.
That sounds like it takes a fair amount of legwork. Are there other, maybe more research-based ways to find motivated sellers?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Public records are often a gold mine here, too. Look for tax delinquent lists. These show properties where owners are behind on property taxes. That's often a huge sign of financial distress and, well, motivation to sell.
Makes sense. What else?
Similarly, keep an eye out for properties with lien-ins filed against them. Could be a mechanics lien from an unpaid contractor, maybe a judgment lien from a lawsuit, even HOA liens for unpaid dues. Any lien suggests the owner owes money tied to the property, which can create pressure to sell.
Okay, liens and taxes. What about code violations? You mentioned those.
Right. Property cited for code violations, maybe unpermitted work, or just serious neglect that breaks city rules that can signal an owner who's either unable or unwilling to keep the place up. They might be facing fines, legal headaches, and just want to unload the property, maybe at a discount, to get rid of the problem.
And pre-foreclosure lists, those sound like a pretty direct line to highly motivated sellers.
They really can be.
Yeah.
Homeowners in pre-foreclosure are behind on their mortgage payments and are facing losing their home. Reaching out offers them a potential way out, sell the property, pay off the debt, avoid the hit of a full foreclosure on their credit. They're often extremely motivated to sell quickly, even if it means taking less.
And probate listings, too.
Yes, probate is another avenue. That's when a property owner has passed away, and the property is going through the legal process to settle the estate and distribute assets to heirs. The heirs might not want the property, might live far away, or just want to liquidate it quickly to get their inheritance. So they can be quite motivated to sell.
Okay, so lots of off-market strategies. But what about using the regular channels, like the MLS? Can you still find potentially undervalued properties there?
You definitely can, yes. It just requires a different kind of searching. One key strategy is to look for properties that have been sitting on the market for a while, say 30 days, 60 days, maybe longer.
Stale listings.
Exactly. Or look for properties that have had significant price reductions. Both of those can indicate that the sellers are getting more flexible, more motivated. You can usually set up custom alerts on real estate websites to notify you when properties meet those criteria.
Partnering with the right people seems important too. Investor-friendly agents and wholesalers came up. How do those connections help find deals?
Good point. Agents who specialize in working with investors often hear about deals before they hit the open market. They might know sellers who prefer a quiet off-market sale or have connections to distressed situations.
You got to network with the right agents.
Absolutely. Clearly communicate what you're looking for, your criteria, price range, target areas, and stay in touch. Wholesalers are another piece of the puzzle. They actively hunt for distressed or undervalued properties, get them under contract, and then assign that contract to an end buyer, like you, for a fee.
Okay.
Building relationships with reputable wholesalers can give you access to a steady stream of potential deals. You just need to be ready to analyze them quickly and act fast if you're interested.
And for those willing to put in maybe even more effort, direct mail campaigns were mentioned. Do those still work? Seems a bit old school.
Surprisingly effective, actually, if done right. A targeted direct mail campaign can reach homeowners who might be facing situations that motivate selling, maybe divorce, job loss, inheritance, mounting debt, but haven't listed their property yet.
So you target specific neighborhoods or demographics.
Exactly. Maybe neighborhoods showing signs of decline or lists of absentee owners. Personalizing the message, emphasizing you can close quickly, buy as-is with cash that can really increase your response rate from genuinely motivated sellers. And, throughout all these real estate activities, whether buying, selling, or managing properties, protecting your data is absolutely crucial. That's where Stonefly comes in. They offer really robust and reliable data protection solutions.
Right, securing all that sensitive information.
Precisely. Their advanced services, things like immutable snapshots, which make data unchangeable, and strong AES 256 encryption provide real peace of mind. If listeners want to learn more about securing their data, they should check out stonefly.com or email sales@stonefly.com.
Okay, good point. Now, just briefly, let's touch on understanding the broader real estate cycle. It feels like knowing the overall economic climate can really impact your negotiation position.
Oh, massively. The commercial real estate cycle, typically seen as having 4 phases: recovery, expansion, hypersupply, and recession. It significantly impacts everything: property values, rents, how much new construction is happening. For example, in a recovery phase, occupancy might be low, rents flat or falling. That's often when savvy buyers can find bargains, maybe properties needing work, but with good potential.
And then in expansion.
Expansion sees rising demand, falling vacancy, more building. Sellers usually have more leverage there. Hypersupply is when maybe there's too much building or demand slows down, rent growth stalls, vacancies creep up. Sellers might need to offer concessions then. And recession. Well, supply outweighs demand, vacancies are high, rents might fall. That can be a time to pick up distressed assets at a discount.
So knowing where the market is in that cycle is key context.
Absolutely. And understanding the big economic drivers too: interest rates, job growth, demographics, government policies, even just overall consumer confidence. And remember, different property types: apartments versus industrial versus retail versus office. They can behave differently within the same cycle phase.
Right. Good context to have. And just one more mindset thing before we wrap up this idea of overpaying. It was suggested that in a really hot competitive market, maybe thinking you overpaid is kind of a fallacy. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. In a market where you have multiple offers on almost every decent property, the actual market value is often being set right then and there by what the highest qualified buyer is willing and able to pay.
So the winning bid is the market value at that moment?
In a sense, yes.
Hmm.
So while you might look back and say, wow, I paid more than that identical house sold for 6 months ago, you are competing against other buyers today who are also willing to pay that much or close to it. The key is working with a good agent who understands the local nuances, so you don't drastically overpay compared to the next highest bidder. But understanding that in a rapidly rising market, you might be the one setting a new benchmark. Accepting that can be a necessary mindset shift.
So tying this all together, what does this really mean for our listeners? Whether you're actively in the market now, buying or selling, or maybe just thinking ahead, getting a handle on these negotiation tactics, these ways to find motivated sellers, and the bigger market picture, it seems like it can give you a real advantage.
Definitely. Being informed, being strategic, knowing your options, and crucially, knowing when to walk away. Those are all vital pieces.
This deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about, a comprehensive toolkit, really, for real estate negotiations. And as you mentioned, protecting your valuable data through all this is key. Remember, Stonefly leaders in secure storage and data management.
That's right. They offer cutting-edge tech like their patented immutable and air-gapped repository, which is huge for ransomware protection. Stonefly was also recognized by DCIG as a top 5 storage company across SAN, NAS, and object storage. That's pretty impressive. Their unified interface lets you manage tons of storage nodes across different locations easily. To learn more, visit stonefly.com or email sales@stonefly.com. And they're growing fast, over 100 job openings. Interested folks can email jobs@stonefly.com.
And they have a pretty compelling promotion this month, too, right?
They do. Just $10 for immutable and air-gapped backup OR, and this is a big one, a 70-terabyte backup and disaster recovery appliance, which is expandable up to 4 petabytes, fully supporting air-gapped and immutable backups for systems like Veeam, Rubrik, Commvault, plus an advanced AI appliance with object lockdown for ransomware protection. All for $700. That's a serious offer. Contact sales@stonefly.com for the details on that.
Wow. Okay. So here's a final thought for everyone listening to consider. In any negotiation, not just real estate, what's maybe one assumption you tend to make about the other person's motivations? And how could challenging that specific assumption potentially open up new possibilities and maybe lead to a better outcome for you? Something to think about.